I think it's live again now. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So, I'm not sure what's really happening with our live streaming. It's not showing up the way it is supposed to. Uh, but if anybody is able to confirm, because we're not, yeah. Um, I just want to give it, just give me a minute, Raeesa. I just want to check if it's streaming. Oh, it's streaming right now. So I see it. Okay.
Okay.
I think it's streaming, so I don't know why the something is off with the views, but that's fine. Inshallah, at least the recording will be there. So Jazakallah khair, and thank you for your patience with the confusion with the stream. We are resuming here the same conversation, so we don't have to start over, Raisa. We'll just take it from where your last point. So you were saying
Yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah. So I was basically saying that regardless of how our children are being educated, at the very least, like I'm saying, the minimum, we should be having these discussions with them. We
Right.
shouldn't be assuming that what they're being taught with this critical awareness. And like I said, in my opinion and just in my experience, it's not promoted, it's not pushed to teach children to be critical. It's not something that's really encouraged in the institutions anyway. It's easier, it's preferred for children to receive information and accept it. And the things that are, allowed to be debated and critiqued, they're very, orchestrated. You'll be given a topic, and, for example, in English, you know, argue about whether or not homework should be banned. And they're giving these surface level skills about how to write an argument or how to be persuasive, but they're not teaching them how to really think critically. They're just giving them like 4 or 5 skills in how to write to persuade, and that's it. So you can learn how to like use a particular technique and persuade someone of something, but it's not the same as having the confidence to know you disagree with what you're being taught. It's really not the same thing. You're still doing what your teacher's telling you. Your teacher's telling you you can agree, you can disagree. This is how you agree, and this is how you disagree. Like it's
That's true.
still very controlled, and that's it.
Yeah.
So, it's problematic if nobody is giving the children these skills. Um, which is my first point is we need to be having those conversations at home, and now what's going on at school, which discussions are happening. Like even for my son, he doesn't go to school, so he's home educated, but he still goes to groups. The majority of his groups are Muslim children, but even still, when he comes back in the car, after some time, I don't jump on him, but I'll casually just, if he brings it up, so he asked a few questions straight away about the situation going on. So it occurred to me that some children have been speaking about this. So straight away, I was trying to open up the conversation, ask him, so what do you think about that? Because we need to make sure that we are having the conversations, like, in our own homes, so that we can foster this ability to question and to say, whatever needs to be said to come to a conclusion. So I think that's the first thing, is that even, if we're not being academic about it, just understanding we can question, we can, ask, what did you think? How do you feel about this? Do you agree with this? Did you disagree? Those kinds of questions, so that our children realize that they can have their own opinion about
Yeah. Yeah.
what they're being taught by.
Yeah, I think, subhanallah, what you're saying, I think there are two things like that's coming up for me. So one is that the fact that they should have that confidence first, right?
Mm,
They should have that confidence that you can hold your own, you can disagree with something, you
yeah,
can that to me is something that
yeah,
developmentally there is a lot that needs to happen, but let's assume that that is happening, and you have that relationship with them, and you have that, you have done all of that work. Then the next
mm,
step is to show them how you disagree. Like, so
yeah,
I guess there is a lot of modeling that comes in, and perhaps that's what you mean by like reading with them and showing them how you disagree, or how you and then show them that it's possible, and kind
Mm,
of like read in between the lines, like with the words, with the choice of words, or just try to see what the character is doing, and just different things like that, like the critical thinking, like looking at things from a critical lens.
mm,
That's something that you can model
yeah.
as you read with the child. You're reading with the child and you're showing them that, right?
Yeah. And I mean, this is still me being general because, I'm not here to teach an English lesson or critical reading lesson that's just going to be quite like, specific.
Right,
And like I said, that's a long process. So I'm giving, and inshallah, I'll go on to snippets of more specific examples from,
right,
English academics. But beyond that, just like I said to you when we were just discussing this, there's things that I've learned from my experience in teaching and teaching these subjects and teaching English that I can just apply in a general way as a parent because
right,
obviously I'm used to thinking in that way. I'm used to
right.
teaching in that
That's true. Yeah.
way. So
So
what
if
I'm
there was
doing
a
is
lay person, like, like somebody listening in and they have no idea, like, so they get it, like, okay, this is important. We must prioritize this. What would be a good place to begin for them?
so I think that's the first thing we've said, like open up conversation, ask
Okay.
them how did they feel about something they heard, something they read? When if and when you're reading together, stop every so often and ask them, what do you think about this? Or depending on the age, what do you think about what's going on here, or the character, or how do you feel, or whatever seems relevant. These aren't academic questions. These are just thinking about what you're consuming at the time.
That's true.
The
Yeah.
second point, moving on from that, is I think we really, and this is difficult in our cultures, but we really, really have to challenge this idea that teachers hold this like position, like some kind of prophets or some kind of like perfect human.
Right.
Teachers are just human beings,
Yeah.
and it's really problematic when we make our children feel like anything a teacher says and that's your teacher. And I'm not talking about adab. Like we
Yeah.
can still have good manners with a teacher and
Yes.
actually deal with them. I'm not saying anything about manners at this point, but
Right.
especially in our Asian cultures and I'm sure other cultures, we have this obsession with teachers being like anything they say and their
Yeah.
opinion on the child. It overrides your own like your child better than any teacher. Yeah,
That's true. Yeah.
know things about themselves better than their teacher does. And,
Right.
we have to equip our children or give them the understanding that yes, we respect our teachers. However, they are human beings and they may do something, they may say something that we don't agree with, that we don't like,
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
problematic.
Like they have their own biases, they have their
Yeah,
own worldview, they have, and which could be completely antithetical to our values. So like just empowering them with this knowledge and this confidence that you can disagree with them or you can disagree with something
yeah,
is just so invaluable, so that
yeah,
they learn to hold their own when they are
yeah,
engaging with any material or any conversation with anybody,
yeah, yeah,
and I think that again affirms what we have talked about in the program and elsewhere, that that doesn't happen until the child is has had
mm,
that period of being
mm,
close to you and you have done the work. Because there is a when they're super young, they just
mm,
mirror whoever they're attached to. So that's why them being close to you and maintaining that closeness is so important, so that when they
yeah,
are like when they're going out, if they go out and learn some skills, that's the skill building part, right? So what you said earlier about not making teachers like the end all be all, and
mm,
just really like first of all preparing them before they go out, that make sure that they're attached to you,
yeah,
and and they are developed with those skills enough at home, whether through your nurturing, your teaching, whatever, they have
mm,
reached that point where they actually are able to disagree. Because
yeah,
it's a product of two things: it's a skill, plus it's a cognitive developmental
yeah,
milestone that they have to
mm,
be there. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And it's all still tied into the same. Children who can't, who do not have strong skills in being able to critique, they often can't explain what the issue is. So they will have feelings. They'll feel like, oh, something's not right about this teacher. I
Yeah.
don't like it. And they won't be able to explain what the issue is. And that then becomes very difficult, especially for parents who aren't there. And
Right.
that's when it turns into, we downplay it like, oh, maybe he's just complaining because he doesn't want to go, or when actually maybe they are trying to communicate like the teacher's not making sense to me, or the teacher is
Yeah.
too, it's the reason that they need these skills. I obviously keep going back to be able to critique, and
Uh-huh.
by critique I mean to be able to pick things apart and
Right.
think about different elements of them. So I'll give you an example. My
Yeah.
son goes to like a Quran class, and it's quite a
Okay.
new thing because he's still young.
Right.
And one of the days that he went, he came back and he was upset about it. And I could see that when they're young and they're holding the emotion and then they're
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
else project the emotion. So after eventually we got to a point where he was okay to talk, he had this very circular, which is quite difficult as a parent because you want to shut it down. He's like, I don't like it because I don't like it, because I don't like
Yeah.
it. Going
Yeah.
round, I don't like it because I don't like it. And
Right.
I've started to explain to him from now, like he's 6, that we can't say we don't like something because we don't like it. We can't say we like something because we like it. And I gave him some examples at that moment and said, if I say I don't like something because, I gave him another scenario, because I don't like the setting, or I don't like the people, or I don't like what I'm learning, or then the people listening to you can understand you. But if you just keep going around in a circle, nobody understands what the problem is. If there's a real problem, if you're just feeling tired and hungry, it's very difficult.
Right.
And so he stopped for a while, and he explained to me, and he said, I'm only 6, and it's very difficult for a child who's 6 to sit still for an hour.
Wow.
And that
He,
I could
he
completely, it was very valid. And it
and he
made me
said it
think,
like that? He
yeah.
said it like that? Oh wow.
And because he said it like that, I said, I completely agree with you. It is actually, and I didn't know, because I genuinely didn't know there would be an expectation of him to sit down for 1 hour, that he wouldn't be able to move around. And I went with that information. I spoke to my husband and I said he doesn't go to any setting where he has to sit still for an hour. He's
Right.
articulated. He doesn't have a problem with the teacher. He doesn't
Right.
have a problem with the children. So it shows he's critiqued it and he's come up with something valid, reasonable, and worth respecting. And it's so
Yeah.
important because there will be so many kids who are feeling that restlessness and that frustration, but they can't explain it in a critical way, in a way where they've picked it apart, they've identified the problem and explained it, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm trying to show through that these skills can be nurtured and developed at a very young stage.
Yeah.
Um,
I
inshallah. So
yeah.
yeah,
I think what you're saying to me, it sounds like this is also going to give them agency, right?
mm,
To advocate for themselves, to hold like it's I think it's so important for their personal development and just their identity, and then just knowing who they are and what they need, and like just being able to advocate for themselves, which I think is
yeah,
so important, like just so that they just don't
mm,
sway in with whatever is the popular idea, or just shut themselves down and just not be able to
mhm,
communicate, because communication serves so many things. It's not just being
yeah,
able to not just in those situations where we disagree with people, but even to express ourselves. Like if we have a point of view that is worth sharing, but then just knowing how to express it and not keep it inside, like like how do I express it to this audience, let's say.
mm,
It's I think language skills are by far the most important skills, like for human
yeah.
beings, right?
And this is the thing. I think sometimes, again, in our cultures, people isolate English as a subject, but obviously the language skills they transfer to every other subject and every other scenario. So if you look at now, obviously this is later down the line to some extent in the workplace. People. I think more so probably in America than even here. The way that people are now being, um, singled out. People are being like um,
Yeah.
targeted,
Yeah.
but subtly, institutionally. I'm not saying they're being physically attacked in the
Yeah.
workplace,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they are clearly, with everything that's going on, being singled out. And equally in schools, so there have been incidents in schools here, there have, I'm sure, been incidents over there. And the issue is, again, if you're not thinking it with a critical mind, you won't be able to put your finger on it. You won't be able to hit the nail on the head. You'll feel, did that, that didn't feel right what that teacher said, or are they actually, or am I being paranoid? Or because often it's these microaggressions, it's these very subtle things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, if you're not equipped and empowered to recognize that, which is why I'm saying on word level, look at the language that's being used, look at the choice of words being used, look at the choice of, imagery, colors, all of those things in whatever, I'm speaking generally.
Yeah. Yeah. But makes
Because
sense.
it's not always something big. It's not that you're going to go out and either you're going to be physically attacked or nothing. There's a whole,
Yeah. Range of
scope
things.
in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
You know, it's our children need to be able to recognize that. They need to be able to see in literature, in the storybooks, they need to be able to recognize that this doesn't sit right or this doesn't feel right and why. Like
Right.
what, not just the feeling inside, because you can't do
Yeah.
much with feeling you can't articulate,
Yeah.
while other people are
Yeah.
paying millions of pounds into their like PR teams and their marketing. We need to have the tools to be able to pick things apart as well and be able to explain what the problem is. And again, my point is it can start in childhood. It can start
Right.
very young. It
Right.
doesn't have to wait till you're an adult and you have to like
Yeah.
re-educate yourself.
Right.
So
Because I think, okay, so your first point is that we don't want to delay this. We want to start early, and
yeah,
there's a lot of benefit in starting early because it's going to help them right from early on. Have agency, have they will be able to critically look at things, whether it's something they're reading or listening, and they will be able to kind of wrestle with it and take the good from it, and instead of like just consuming and absorbing everything, there will be a filter, a natural filter, and they will have that mechanism,
yeah,
with them. So you've
yeah,
empowered them with a
mm,
skill that is useful and that's used for all of life. But
yeah,
there's no benefit in delaying it because we
mm.
think that critical thinking is really like you have to be really like much
But also
older and
because if you delay it, you teach them for the first part of their life you can't question things. Because I said so and because your teacher said so. It's very difficult to turn a submissive, accepting child into a critical one afterwards. You
that's
think
true.
about many of us for adults, how much we struggle with things like confrontation or disagreement or challenging things. And
That's
again, I
true.
don't mean in any way with where the manners are not there. I say even within the academic world, how difficult does it feel for many of us to actually stick our head up and say, this is not correct?
Yeah.
Because as children, we weren't allowed to do that. So you can't
Yeah.
begin with people who, because it's convenient, they have to be submissive. And then later on, you want them to be these great critical minds. Like, it's not going to
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah, I think you're
unfortunately.
saying two things here, Raisa, and I think it's worth highlighting. You mentioned it clearly, but I think it's worth highlighting that this is not about adab. This is not about being nasty. This is not about just
Or
disagreeing for the
being,
sake of disagreeing.
yeah,
No, it's about having your, like, it's like a gate to your house. So like I can't let garbage in, basically. So I have a way to kind of like keep it out or challenge it or say I disagree with it and hold my own. And sometimes this may look like not saying anything back, but in your mind knowing that this is nonsense.
yeah,
Just be able to sift it in your mind so that you can keep it out when you see it. And
mm,
of course, like subhanallah, this is part of our deen. Our deen teaches us to be people of reflection, to be people of, tadabbur, and, like just people of, who think for themselves. We're not
mm,
supposed to be, not a religion of blind faith anyways, right? We don't just take, if we don't do that with Allah's word, I mean,
mm,
like Allah's
mm,
not saying, expecting us to just blindly follow things. Allah wants us to think. Allah wants us to, you know, use that. He's given us something that He wants us to use.
yeah.
And
Oh,
it's supposed to strengthen us. It's supposed to, because, we have the haqq. We are not trying
yeah,
to run away from something that is, propaganda or lies or just blind faith, right? It is it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So like it's something that we use on all levels, like whether we go out of the house or even within our homes, within our, our private relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're supposed to wrestle with things and hold those conflicting ideas in our mind so that we can
Mm.
be more developed and, developed as people.
Yeah.
It's an important skill all around, just to have that ability, not just
Mm.
like externally, like when we are dealing with others, but even within our own, how do we disagree with ourselves?
Mm.
Sometimes,
Yeah.
it may happen like your nafs says something, you have the desire to do something, right?
Yeah.
But then you're
Yeah.
at that time, you're disagreeing with yourself in a way, right?
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
challenging your own self. And where does
Yeah.
that come from?
Mm.
It's
Yeah. It's
again a
because,
skill. Yeah.
yeah, it's having that insight into your own thinking, being
Yeah.
able to have insight into your own, am I being rational right now? Am I
Yeah.
overthinking? Am I being balanced? That's
Yeah.
still critical skills. It's the
Yes.
same, you know, and
Family. Yeah. Of
yeah,
skills.
it's the same skill set, it's the same way of thinking. It's understanding. For example, we all have this internal voice. Even understanding language so that we can understand the words that are going on in our own head. Am I using very harsh language about myself in my
Oh,
own head?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Would I use the same words when I was speaking to someone else or if I was speaking to someone else? It all still boils down back to language. It all boils
Oh,
down
that's
to
true.
vocabulary.
Yeah.
All of it. All of this whole there's this whole trend of affirmations. But actually, what are affirmations? They are strings of words that are supposed to help you replace or reframe or whatever, reset your way of thinking. So the point is, like for me and my approach, or I guess my like background, language, just understanding and having a real mastery. Like some of the classes I teach, I literally say to the parents at the beginning, we're aiming for language mastery here. We're not just, memorizing definitions and like closing the book. I say to the students, I say to my students, we're here doing this because we're trying to master this language. We're trying to master our understanding of grammar. I kind of, explain to the students that you should want to be here. And alhamdulillah, a lot of the parents say to me that they give their kids the choice because my classes are not part of any academic, like I don't teach at school, it's extracurricular. And they say my child wants to join. Like we ask them, do you want to do the class? They don't, and they say yes, alhamdulillah. But
Alhamdulillah.
it's because I believe that they feel the empowerment. They
Yeah.
feel they understand what they're going to be able to do with what I'm giving them, rather than
Yeah.
you have to learn this because you have to learn it because you need to
Yeah.
pass an exam. Like,
Right. Right.
whereas when
Well,
they understand the power of it and what they will be able to do when they understand things, it's transformational.
yeah. What would you say? Like, do you think that this is not something that most parents prioritize, or even in the education system, it's not really something that is done, right? Or emphasized quite
Education
the same?
system, not in the education system. Parents, obviously, I can't speak for individual parents, but I feel culturally there's not an emphasis on English, especially for people who speak English. So what I mean by that is maybe like in my case, my grandparents, they would have pushed their children to make sure they learn English, and because you need to, because we moved to England and you have to go to university. Even still pushing them into like medicine, dentistry, but you need to speak English like
Right.
the English people. However, now that we're all English speakers, there's definitely not this emphasis on studying and mastering this language.
Okay.
That because you need to go and do medicine, you need to go and do science, you need to go and do dentistry, and there's a lack of understanding between the connection. Like you can go be a doctor, but be an eloquent one. Be a doctor
Yeah.
who can understand. Like one of my close friends, one of my best friends, she's a doctor. However, within her decade now, mashallah, of training, she's realized systemic, problems with racism within the institution of the NHS. And because, mashallah, she's like an all-rounder, and so she has these strong language skills and these strong critical skills. She was able to challenge that aspect of things to the point where she was advocating for other doctors from abroad who were being prejudiced, who were being like, mistreated within the system. So it doesn't
Yeah.
mean because you're in this field of medicine, it's not relevant to you, or science, or whatever. If you have
Yeah.
the ability, you can. This is my point. Like the example of my friend, she's speaking out against an injustice. And she
Yeah.
literally said, I had to write the emails in the first person as if I was my colleague who came from, say, like Pakistan or India, because they simply didn't have the language skills and they wouldn't have been taken seriously. Even
Yeah.
though they're the ones who are being wronged and they're the one who are being, like, mistreated, your language ability makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Whatever field, whatever, like,
Yeah.
life
This
you're.
this actually reminds me, and I don't know if this example is relevant, but I remember my sister-in-law mentioned once that there was something like her kids, and in that entire neighborhood, there's this immigrant, mostly immigrants
Mm,
population, and there was something that the kids were facing, but nobody had they couldn't put their finger on it, like what was really going on. And until something came out, and it was like on a parent group, and they were all like, yeah, it happened to us too. And yeah, just when somebody threw light on it, right?
yeah,
uh,
yeah,
and then it was very obvious to them that
mm,
this is racism, this is not right, the way all these kids have been kind of like stereotyped, you know and she was like, it was like a, kind of like a Me Too movement, like, like
yeah,
everybody's kind of like, oh, it happened with me as well, and it happened with my child as well. And the entire
mm,
like that entire group was like,
yeah,
this is not right. But they
yeah.
didn't
Because it's
have the tools, or culturally they were not attuned. Like you said, most parents are sending the kids to school, or if you can learn a few skills and you can go to a good university, get a good job, that's it. Like the function of education is sometimes reduced to skill building or professional, um,
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like getting the praise of your teacher, and your teacher thinks that you're the top student in the class for your behavior, and like teacher's pet kind of situation.
right, right.
Again, I'm not saying it's praiseworthy to be in the bad books of your teacher. But what I'm saying is, if there is a case, or if there's a scenario where you need to flag something up, you need to actually raise something, and it's not unheard of, it's actually very common. It's very, very common. Like, I gave you that example. No, I didn't. I told you generally, but I can't remember if I gave you the example of myself. I was telling some of my students about it that when I was young, I was about 14, and I had this really staunch Darwin teacher. I don't remember if I told you. He was like
No,
really
you
into
didn't tell me. Tell me.
evolution. He was really like a real Darwinist, and he was old, like so old, middle, like a white man who was really pro Darwin. And this is biology. And at school, I was quiet. Like I was quiet. I was, I didn't go to a school that was hugely mixed. So I was also like very aware that I was a minority and all of that. However, what I did tell you was that when I was at school, Alhamdulillah, my mom's a biochemist, but she's a real thinker. She wanted to do English. And so she used to go to school at the beginning of every academic year, and she used to ask for the curriculums for that year. And the school used to hate it, and they used to try and say, oh, no, we don't have the year plan. And she basically used to demand to see the curriculum for the year that they were planning to teach. So she would know what we're going to be taught before we're taught it. And so she realized that in this year, in year nine, we're going to be introduced to Darwinism. So obviously, the summer before, we call it year nine, is when you're 14. Um, she sat me down, and probably my siblings, and explained to us all of the problems with Darwinism. How it's essentially, there are all these lies, and there are all these things that cannot be proven, and all these flaws within the theory of evolution. And so when I went to school, I used to write in my biology book. So my science teacher would write like Darwin found and then whatever. And
Yeah.
I used to, Darwin proposed and the same
Uh-huh.
sentence, one word. And I would do
Yeah.
it all the time. I would write Darwin theorized, Darwin suggested, Darwin believed. So I would
Yeah.
change one word so that for me, I was maintaining my truth that I'm not willing to write this down as a fact. My biology teacher would take a red pen and cross out that one verb that I would write, so suggested or believed or proposed, to the point where it's like this back and forth, and I wouldn't stop doing it. And there's no like spoken argument even happening, no spoken like me disagreeing with my teacher. It was just in my book, to the point where he would send me out of the class. just because it enraged him so much that I wouldn't accept his ideas as a fact
And
in
you're 14.
biology. I was
You're
14,
14.
yeah. But the reason I had the courage to do that, so that's called being critical, is because my mom, mashallah and alhamdulillah,
Mashallah.
she taught us that your teachers will lie to you. She literally said that to us. She said, you'll go to school and your teachers will lie to you about certain things. Now imagine how radically different that is to children who are being taught everything your teacher says. Just try to,
Revelation.
yeah. And she sat us down. She taught us about Rosa Parks. She made us watch. I told you about like watching Roots. She told us how to expect Muslims to be portrayed within the school, historical Muslims and the Crusades and things. So it meant that I was prepared for it all. And so when I actually did, exactly as my mom said, hear this biased, really prejudiced, portrayal of things, I was like, yeah, this is exactly what I was told to expect. This is what's happening.
Right.
And it made me feel like, almost like where you think, oh, maybe my mom's just saying this, maybe like she's just being too
Yeah.
because my family is very politically like minded and very politically active. So I thought maybe she's just being too passionate. But when I saw it was true, it was like my mind opened. Like, yeah, actually, people will lie to you. People who are supposed to teach you things will lie to you
Yeah.
because I understood the concepts of bias and prejudice and having your own agendas. And
Yeah.
so this is my point that language is very, very powerful, and being able to question like your teachers and being able to pinpoint. So this whole point was me demonstrating how just pinpointing what the problem is. So in that
Yeah.
class with Charles Darwin, the topic, the whole problem was just me not accepting it being written as a fact. So my
Right.
contention was I don't want to write this as a fact
Yeah.
because
Because it's a
I don't
theory.
agree.
Yeah.
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 So I
Yeah.
could pinpoint what the issue was. The issue was my teacher is writing this theory as a fact, and I can pinpoint that I disagree with that. It's a
Right.
very particular skill to be able
Right.
to pinpoint the problem, as
Right.
opposed to sitting in the class thinking, oh, this sounds a bit like it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Just feeling it, but you
Yeah.
can't pinpoint what the problem is.
Yeah.
We need to be able to
Subhanallah.
give those skills, like those very refined skills to children because they're still going to these schools, and now it's even worse. Like you've got people believing all kinds of things now. you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And subhanallah, like, it's very interesting to me that your mom tried to be a step ahead and
Mm.
brought you the
Yeah.
resources and gave you the analysis beforehand. And I think this cannot be undermined because, like sometimes, especially as you're developing and growing, as a young person whose personality is not formed, you don't have your everything is adding to it. Everything is adding to it. And if that addition that is happening has no gatekeeping, no filters,
Yeah.
you're essentially leaving this world, you know, this the way in which they view the world, the way they receive from the world is just going to become like completely out of your hand. And they're very
Mhm.
impressionable. Like the young kids, the younger they are, the more impressionable they are, and they wouldn't know how to have
Yeah.
that healthy disagreement or
But
just
also, imagine how refreshing it is. And I can say this firsthand, alhamdulillah. There weren't things that I'm not saying that in every case I was just like in agreement with my parents. I was still actually quite rebellious in some ways. But academically, we were on the same page. And actually, it's really important to academically, but when I say on the same page, I mean we could have all of these discussions. And it's very like, you have this enthusiasm when you can go home and be like, Mom, my teacher actually said this, or I
yeah,
got sent to biology because of this, and your mom's going to be on your side.
right,
Like you academically, or like, I don't mean you have to be from an academic household. I mean that your approach to academics is on the same page.
right.
That
They're
you,
involved in your education, and
yeah,
they are involved, and that's why they understand where you're coming from and what you're.
yeah,
Sometimes I think this is another thing, and I think we've talked about it in the, in our past exchanges, that it's not necessary that you practically homeschool.
Yeah.
and control everything that the child is going to learn and make it pass through you. That's not what we are saying, but we can definitely have a different relationship
Mm.
towards their education, where you are in an empowered position, where you can pick and choose, and you can be that gatekeeper basically. Where are they
Mm.
learning what, and
Yeah.
who is teaching what, and what part of it you're being very very intentional about, like, is this
Mm.
giving me more problems in exchange of a few skills? Like, is this something
Yeah.
that I want? Like, that's so important to know. Like, or am I just for
Mm.
this one little skill trading off
Mm.
all the, possibilities that I can have to impart not
Mm.
just the skill, but then this worldview, this understanding, this lens through which they can see the world. Because, increasingly, if you look at it, like, I feel sometimes like it's not just the the different sections of society. They and it's naive to think that people don't have agendas. Like, we can't assume that. Like, everybody has an agenda, everybody has a, you know something that they're trying to achieve. And if we leave our minds open, and like, it's an open door, just anything can come in, it's the most dangerous thing we can do. And it may not seem like it until, like, people all of a sudden realize, like, when their child is like 13, 14, and they're like, I don't know who
Yeah.
this person is. And I have had people very
Yeah.
close to me say that, like, how did this happen? Like, I can't even believe this is my child. This is how they view the world, but we've
Yeah.
allowed them to be
Yeah.
out there without any filters whatsoever.
Yeah, and I think that leads on to the other, like one of the other things that we discussed prior to the live, which is one of the things, in the discussion on, is we really, again, I know if our kids go to school and institutions, this is a bit more of a challenge.
Right.
However, I feel I'm an example that it can be done. Like I went to every like mainstream school from the age of whenever you start,
Right, right.
through to everything. I wasn't homeschooled. I wasn't anything, alternative in terms of education. But anyway, we really, really, really have to take steps to decenter like the West. We have to take steps to decenter and detach from Western approaches and Western um, content even in
Yeah,
education.
that's so
And
true.
it's so like for me, it's just so I always kind of like sigh as a teacher. You have these parents and they're like, yeah, can you just do all these classics with my children and like Shakespeare and all of these things. Like I've studied Shakespeare, and again, I'm only going to speak from my subject. I'm not saying that it's all wrong and we shouldn't read it. But what I'm saying is that again, in our cultures, there's real deep rooted colonial like mindsets here, and they lift up these things like the British literature like it's some kind of fell down from the sky, amazing stuff. Within it, embedded within all of it, are racist ideas, are problematic, concepts, and we should keep it in its place.
Yeah,
Rather than thinking if you read Shakespeare, you're some brilliant mind now. You
yeah,
really it, keep it in its place. We shouldn't be prioritizing that. We really, really shouldn't. We're just
yeah,
like regurgitating the same mindset that these are the best books and these are the best authors. And when you look within them, like you look in Shakespeare, everyone who is a character, like look at Othello, who are from abroad, like Othello is supposed to be a Muslim. He's portrayed as some barbaric, big African, like beast, the same old, like savage connotations.
right.
There are problems within this literature. There are problems within things that were written by white people for white people who thought the rest of the world was exotic,
Yeah.
for
I
those
remember
things to be.
reading Secret Garden, getting so, like, I was red in my face the way they were describing Indians. And I was
Yeah,
like, I remember like getting really stumped, like, wait a minute, they're, it's so in the face.
yeah,
It's not
yeah,
even like,
yeah.
it's very,
It-
very,
it's everywhere. It's in the museum. Like, we so many again, I feel like banging my head on the wall. Like people take their children to like the museum, like the British Museum and stuff. Like, wow. And it's like you should be walking through these places if you're gonna go there, feeling like you're in some, you know, building full of like looted goods and things that have been robbed, and you should be outraged walking
yeah.
around that place. You shouldn't be like, wow, look at what they've got here and praising. It's like they've robbed all parts of the earth and here's the proof that they've done it. Like,
Yeah.
think, and I know that this is me getting quite passionate, but there's nothing more
No,
frustrating than,
I think it's important because see, look at the current scenario. The
yeah,
argument is like we will kick you out of your land. We will do all kinds of atrocities, and you shouldn't even complain. And
yeah,
that's the colonial project, right? Like
mm,
that's like
mm,
the whole idea is like you shouldn't even be offended. You
yeah.
should, and
Well,
I
yeah, we've
think I,
been,
I see it in like especially in desis. Like I see that almost like an inferiority complex, and it doesn't matter how educated you are in the worldly sense. Like when I say
mm,
worldly sense, I mean like academic sense. If you
mm,
have that underlying feeling that you're lesser than, then it's done
mm.
its job. And I think that's really sad. Like if we are
You
not
become,
able to
like,
actively,
like
sorry,
no, you're right. It is that like inferiority. We become apologists. We
yeah,
become like we should just be happy that they acknowledged something that I said, and it's just like this comes from as in childhood. Everything single thing you're studying is completely disconnected to you. Like
yeah,
so as homeschoolers, especially who have complete, not complete, but we have much more control.
yeah, and
It's like I
freedom.
was saying the other day, like people need to think why, when you have control, are you still beginning your study of history with Western history? Why on earth are you still studying like these Bronze Age or Victorians as your first like introduction into history?
Yeah,
It's a lack of understanding, like critical thinking, that wherever you begin history is your center, and
right.
everything else is, like far from center. We should be centering what is most important. What's most important, like I said to you the other day,
Yeah.
for me, history started with the history of the land of the Prophet ﷺ. That is our first introduction into history, seerah, essentially. Geography, our first formal study of geography, is also the land of the Prophet ﷺ. Understanding that land, understanding valleys because Mecca is in a valley, understanding the terrain of Mecca, geography, but geography not of the UK, of the most important place to us. So the center of my education is also the center of what's my beliefs. And
You
everything
know,
else
what you're
stands for.
saying is so important. And I think I want to just touch on this. Maybe if somebody listens, they may find benefit. Um, this goes back to development. Like with very young children, you know, if you begin with something that, like when you're very young and you can't hold conflicting ideas, you don't have this understanding of this is other and this is us.
Mm,
They will try to unnaturally fit with the other, and it
yeah,
interferes with their identity development. Like they see themselves, like they will have to put it somewhere, right? So
yeah,
like it's the same thing that they say with just always reading about. I think there are books on this. I think there's a book called mirrors and mirrors and windows, like how you want to engage with characters that are different from you, but then also characters that are like you, so that you can there's a relatability factor, right? So
mm,
for a very young child, they're trying to be like us, like the parents, whoever
yeah,
they're attached to. There's a desire to have that likeness, and
mm,
because they are not there yet to hold this opposite idea. And at that time, if you push them with a very alien culture that is alien to them, and leave
mm,
them with people who are different from them, they will have to kind of like make a choice, where do they belong? And they may start to think that that's where they belong, and they start identifying with that more than you.
mm,
You're setting them up to have this confusion almost.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I like what you're saying. Like you begin with what is relevant, what is
yeah.
in within the attachment family, which is you're attached to this
It's also
family of
because
practicing Muslims.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's also you're showing them your priority because you don't have to actually say this is most important to us. This children will see that what we begin with, like the same way we begin our homeschool day with Fatiha,
right.
because it's most important. We begin our study of history and our study of geography with the
Yeah,
place that the Prophet ﷺ came from because he is the most important. It doesn't need to all be explicitly said in that
yeah,
way.
that's true.
They
Yeah,
understand it. And it will, so my other son who's 3, because we've begun like this, Alhamdulillah, Allahumma barik. Now when he's just playing, like he's playing, making random, like he made a door out of some bricks, but he's like, this is a door of Prophet Sallam's house. They make a
No,
step.
mashallah.
This is the step of the Prophet Sallam's house.
Mashallah.
Why is he saying that? Why is he not saying this is the door of a Stone Age caveman? Why? Because the most important thing for him is what he was taught first.
Right.
You know, it's
Yeah, he
like
got exposed to
the
that
reason why this
first.
really stresses me out is because for so many years, for a decade now, within these institutions, it's the brown people that you meet who have this like reverence for everything Western. And like you
Yeah.
said, it's like feeling like, oh, I've made it, and I'm working in this institution now. I'm learning in this institution, so I should just be in praise and in awe. And it's like, fine, if you want to get an education, fine. I'm not even saying there's a problem with studying all these other aspects of history and geography. But what I'm saying
Yeah.
is that we hold our own
Yeah.
culture and our knowledge
Yeah.
very sacred, and everything else is a world subject. Like, fine, study it,
Yeah.
benefit from it. You don't hold it
Yeah.
up there like it's.
Yeah. So it's like the core. The core has to be
Yeah,
strong and grounded in something that is immediately relevant and something that is
yeah,
long lasting, something that we want them to carry with them and not make
mm,
this other pursuits and all be all, right?
mm.
So,
Yeah, and just
subhanAllah.
in center, like, we now do not have an excuse. Like my kids are like fourth generation in the West. We don't have an excuse not to, buy the correct maps that show things in the correct like proportions, to decenter and stop having this same, colonialist. I'm sorry because it will upset certain people, but it's that mentality, even if we don't realize it, towards education. Like we're allowed to bring in our own stories from our own cultures. We're allowed to bring in, go study. Like I'm hoping, inshallah, after after doing Saudi Arabia to move on to study Pakistan. When have you ever heard anyone doing geography about Pakistan? Like never, unless you're in Pakistan. But why? Because after the place that our Prophet ﷺ comes from, we think about where we've come from.
Yeah.
We're forming identities here. We're not just learning like about all these detached things. And as you said, they then start trying to relate to that. They start trying to make sense of that. And like because my son's caught snippets of Stone Age in other places, this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to marry up how does Stone Age match with the prophets? Which prophet was a Stone Age? Because why wouldn't he? He's trying
Yeah.
to make sense of his foundations, and
Yeah.
because that's in, he's now trying to think, well, was a prophet like a Stone Age caveman at some point? You know, that stuff needs to come afterwards, so our foundations are firm. There's no confusion. It's like the bedrock, and everything else is like interesting information that we learn for the dunya, like fair enough kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the sequencing is important and preparing them for that sequence also, like with the skills that you just mentioned
Mm.
earlier, is important so that when that
Yeah,
comes in, they know that, oh, this also happened and this happened and that happened. And,
because they can
like,
then critique it. Like if it
yeah,
doesn't fit, if it doesn't match with Islam, they can say, well, this doesn't match with our foundation. It doesn't match with what we. So the same way, Darwinism has come up for my son a few times because he's very into dinosaurs, and it was very easy for me to explain it away. Like just to explain to him, there are people, they will have lots of correct information about dinosaurs, and then they will believe that we used to be monkeys. And all I have to say to him is, does that make sense if we know about Prophet Adam? Does it make sense? And he's just like, no, it makes no sense. And he will just completely ignore it. Like, it's gone. It's not important because we've got a foundation. The foundation is firm. We keep, adding to the foundation. So anything else that comes in, it's easy to be like, this person telling you about dinosaurs is just a human being and he doesn't believe what we believe. He believes
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Does it matter?
And
No, it doesn't.
yeah,
That's it. Like,
yeah, makes sense. This is this is so like I like the examples you're sharing. Alhamdulillah, I think we had a good discussion on this. I don't know if anybody has any questions. I can see a chat box here, but I don't know if maybe give it a couple of seconds if you can take some questions, because I think there is a
yeah, I
lot of
feel
like practical stuff that you touched. Did you want to add anything to the things that you mentioned about having that relationship going where you're reading to them and having them discuss and making this a priority. Like, is there anything else that you would like to add while we get any questions, if there may be any, inshallah?
I think just a few things. I think firstly, open up, like don't feel afraid to open up conversations, like questioning things, asking them, what do you think about not just what you're learning, but about your teachers. And don't, we have to separate manners from like opinions, just having an opinion saying, oh, I don't think this teacher was this way or that way. Like it's usually like not meant in a sense of bad manners. Our children, they want to, if they need to criticize, we should make space basically. If they want to critique things, it doesn't have to be an academic exercise to discuss opinions and how you feel about things. So that's the first thing. Really try to have a lot of those conversations so they understand that the home is a place where you can be critical of everything and you can talk
Right.
about it.
Right.
And I think the second point that is really important is to keep studying as adults. Like keep learning. Like I said to you, like I'm currently doing this course on like feminism and critical theory and postmodernism and all these things. And within that, that's where I really understood the issue with critical theory. And these things, like critical theory, are just peddled out in our institutions. And if we don't study ourselves as adults, it will be much more difficult for us to
Yeah,
some of these things.
you actually touched upon something that is so important. All these isms, countless isms that are, I mean, they have their serious flaws and limitations, and they, like, liberalism, like feminism, all of these things. If we are not mindful, and they are in every higher level
Yeah, yeah.
institutions, right? Like all these institutions, and you just have to look at it like just for example, the current situation. If the
Mm,
pursuit is for more, and if some people are more evolved, going back to your Darwinism, by that
mm,
argument that they survival of the fittest, so they are more a higher order race, if you want to
mm,
go there, that they are just a more evolved race.
mm.
What are we talking about here? Is that the
Yeah.
criteria? Like, so they get to do this? They get
Mm,
to, you know, push people who may be of a different race, who in their mind, because they have this flawed theory at the back of their minds, and if the pursuit is for more and whatever, because
mm.
that's what that's where it's going, that's where it's leading, right? That's what it means actually. So how
Mm,
subtly you can have all these messed up equations in your mind,
mm,
and they can, and then you're a recipe for disaster. Like you're open to this kind of propaganda, so to speak. Because like in the current situation, it's not really about religion. Religion is
no, yeah.
just being used as a tool to
Mm,
subjugate and just deny the rights of some people, and just over whatever. Like I was just reading that actually, and I don't want to get into this discussion, but just on a side note, like the founders of Zionism were actually atheists. So it's
yeah.
not a religious people, who
Mm,
are proclaiming that there is a, but they're using the religion where it's convenient. And if we have like, and if you look at any forum, any discussion, the blame goes back to religion. But
mm,
then it's a misuse of
yeah.
whatever. And again, we also have to understand as Muslims that there are problems with previous scriptures, the
Mm,
interpretations of it, and the corruption that happened, right? It doesn't apply to
mm,
us. Like as a Muslim, you have such a big duty. You have
yeah.
something that is so valuable. Like if we are
Mm,
not going to teach our children the value of this and
mm,
understand that this is actually the real solution to all human problems, because it's not like the other isms which are
mm,
flawed and which are man-made and which are short-sighted, and they are reactionary many a times. Like feminism was reactionary because
mm,
of all the problems that were there, and so on and so
mm,
forth. So all of these isms are so flawed. So I think what you're saying is important, that if we are not learning, if we are not
mm,
understanding this kind of nuance, and if we are not critical ourselves to really like listen to things and judge them without like just absorbing whatever we hear and just taking the next big,
Yeah.
idea, coming from the Western, academics or even Eastern philosophies, wherever it may be coming from, for that matter. But generally, you know, like,
Yeah.
and if we don't stop ourselves from seeing things with that worldview, like, it's
Mm,
problematic. Like, and I do that even with, the Islamic understanding. Like,
mm,
why are certain scholars from certain time period more inclined towards this sub
mm,
ideology, for example?
yeah.
Or
Yeah.
and because everything is a reaction. Only the only thing that is truly pure and not subject to human biases and human, interpretations, is the Quran, and then the seerah of the Prophet, the Sunnah of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? That's the only thing that's pure. Everything else is, you can have a criticism for it. Even the
Yeah.
even the four imams said that, like, if you find anything in our books that contradicts with the Quran and the Sunnah, just throw it away. So, like,
Yeah.
we have this critical thinking built into our religion. It's kind of like a prerequisite. It's not even like we have to learn this now because we have to go and navigate in the world and hold our own. No, it's important on all levels as a Muslim.
And
Like,
I think just to add, like, having making sure that you continue to learn and making sure that we need to go deep into, why we're doing things. Just as a, small example, like going to demonstrations. Everybody at these kinds of situations, we become passionate, we become, and yeah, go to the demonstrations,
right,
show, the people, who are affected that we are standing up, we're speaking out. However, even within demonstrations, we have to know our reasons for being there. Just
right,
as a small example, because again, I don't want to open up a discussion.
right,
There are so many things that people are not aware of. So there are all this symbolism of like the fist in the air, and it's used a lot with like the Black Lives Matter and things.
right.
Historically, that symbol is central to Marxism and Marxist theory. And you have so many Muslims using that fist in their, social media and on their placards, completely unaware that its origins are in cultural Marxism, which is not really something that we should be promoting. And I'm not saying that anyone who uses that is
Yeah, we're not
actively.
canceling anybody here. We're, yeah,
I'm not
yeah,
saying that that's their intention. I'm not saying that's why they're using it.
right,
However, the point is, if we're aware, we
right,
do not just, follow like a sheep. We're not just
right,
using the,
right.
we can be a demonstration with our, what we've come
Intentions. Yeah,
for. We can
yeah,
come with we can come with our way of operating. It doesn't
right.
mean we have to adopt every slogan and every image and
That's
every,
true. That's
everybody
true.
else. We can
Yeah,
still be in a shared space and we can still be allied, against something evil, but we still have to be very, very aware of our limits within the deen.
that's
And
so
that comes
true.
from
Subhanallah.
being educated. Like
Yeah,
we can't be carried away and just, because we have
yeah,
limitations. And ultimately, the difference is for us.
right.
Again, I'm not speaking against demonstrations. I've attended demonstrations. However, for us, it's not the demonstration that achieves the
Yeah.
victory.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
100%.
so
Yeah,
the victory comes from Allah regardless. And
yeah,
so again,
yeah.
even with this activism, we have a different, we have a different
Different
understanding.
standard. Yeah. Oh,
Exactly. And
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
it's just
I,
a matter of, really being actively like involved with educating ourselves so we don't just
right.
end up following. Like we don't just
Yeah,
get caught in the moment and follow and
right,
act based on
right,
how everyone else is acting. Like, we
right,
have to have our own boundaries and our own understanding. Even if we seem like we're doing the same thing, what's in
right.
our head is clear. Like,
Yeah,
so I think that's the final point. And our kids, yeah, the children need to know that. They
yeah,
need to know that, understand that.
yeah.
So yeah.
That's your last point, or you have it coming?
No, I
That
was
was a
just saying
lesson.
that what you said. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. No, that's
yeah.
that's a very important point, subhanallah. And I don't think I have anything to add to that because you articulated beautifully, mashallah. There are so many things that happen, and if we are not using our own critical judgment, we would just be, just going from one fad to another, whether in whatever space we are. And it's so important to have this vital skill, um, And again, we access it with language. And I actually have like so many other things to say about language, but this is not the forum for that. But just being able to name, like yesterday I was telling, I don't know if I mentioned it, but just being able to name our emotions, like with what we are going through, and like placing it is so important, so that we don't just project it here and there, like we're seeing, like there is this victimization that is used as a justification for oppression. Like
Yeah.
like you can have your emotional experience, but then how do you cognitively access whatever it is that you've made as an excuse, right? Like we can't, like I feel like there is so much within our deen that teaches us critical thinking, and like even like this idea of disagreeing with yourself, fighting with your nafs. Like where does that come from? It's a reflective skill. Like we are able to look within and say that my urge is to do this or respond in this way, but this is not matching
Yeah.
our values. So then we don't do it. There is this constant, actually, my husband was saying, like, Surah Kahf is like the remedy for the times where everything will be inverted, right? Like the end
Mm.
times. Like that's the advice of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's the epitome of like cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Like Musa alayhi salam, like how is he being taught? Like when he's being given a hard time, he's being taught by this man. And right from the get-go, it's like contradictions, right? It's conflicting ideas. He doesn't seem
Mm.
like the significant person, but Allah says that he knows more.
Mm.
Right from
Yeah.
get-go, right? Everything
Yeah.
that is happening in that story seems like, oh, why would you kill this child? Or why would you make a hole in this boat? Or like, but then Allah's teaching him that you don't know, there is the other side. There is
Yeah.
always the other side, the conflicting idea that you may not know of, and Allah
Mm.
knows. So it teaches us that things are not always as they seem, and we should
Mm.
be able to hold space for that which we don't know, the other side, which Allah
Yeah.
knows. Entire life is about like thinking about the other side and preparing for it. But yeah, I guess
Yeah.
we'll wrap it up, because we can have these discussions, and we can go on with it. What
Yeah.
time is it in UK?
Yeah, it's nearly midnight.
Oh my God. So,
It's
Jazakallah
brilliant.
khair, dear. I really enjoyed this conversation. I don't really see any questions here, or maybe there's something wrong with my chat box. But inshallah, if anybody has any questions, feel free to leave them. If you're inside the Facebook group, you can leave it in the comments. Inshallah, I will pass it on to Raeesa, and she can answer them. And like I said, I really enjoyed this conversation. There's so much to gain from this, not just for the kids' sake, but even for our own sake, and not lose sight of this. This is so important. Like,
Yeah.
because we are bombarded. Like I think there is no shortage of information now. So
Yeah.
discernment is a valued skill now. I think more
Yeah.
valued than even before, because there's just so much
Mm.
that we have to process and kind of sift through.
Mm.
And that discernment and that critical thinking skill with which we put that criteria to kind of sort the information is so important,
Yeah.
right? So
Inshallah. Yeah.
inshallah.
Hopefully it's helped people to just at least,
Inshallah.
just some things you can do with children at the moment, and some discussion,
Inshallah.
great type
Inshallah.
discussions, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Raeesa, and everybody who was here or is watching the replay. Thank you for joining us. Hope you have a good day, and inshallah, see you guys tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to be here with my husband again, and we will continue the session that we started on day one. So we're going to go further with that topic. I'll see you guys. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum, Raeesa. See you.